There's a moment you probably know well. You've just walked away from a conversation. Maybe it was quick, a comment at work, a message on your phone, a look that lasted a second longer than usual, and then you leave. Physically, you leave, but a part of you doesn't. That part stays there, replaying, rewinding, listening again to what was said, trying to calculate what it really meant. Was he quiet because he was busy or because he was annoyed? Did she smile because she meant it or just to be polite? Did I say something wrong? And while all of that is happening in your mind, something else is happening in your body. Stay with this for a moment. Your body is already reacting. Maybe your stomach tightens a little. Not pain, just a quiet tension you barely notice anymore because you've gotten used to it. Maybe your shoulders lift millimeter by millimeter without you asking them to. Maybe your jaw is a little tighter than it needs to be. Maybe your breathing only reaches the middle of your chest, as if there's an invisible line the air can't cross. You didn't tell your body to do any of that, it just did, and the mind came later, running after it, trying to explain what the body had already decided to feel. This is something most people never notice. The thoughts about what other people think of you don't start in the mind, they start in the body. They start with tension, with a tightening, with a tiny shift in posture that says, before any words appear in your head, be careful, something might be wrong here, stay with me. By the end of this, it will make sense in your body, not just in your head. I should warn you about this video, it won't be quick. There's a part of you that wants the answer right away. The step 1, step 2, the 5-minute technique that fixes everything. This isn't that kind of video, because what's happening inside you, this habit of monitoring what people think, replaying conversations, adjusting yourself to avoid disapproval, that didn't form in 5 minutes. It formed slowly, year after year, layer on top of layer, and your body kept the record of all of it. So the path here is slower, deeper. And it begins, like I said, in the body. Let me introduce you to someone. Her name is Camilla. Camilla is 31. She works at a mid-sized company in a role she fought hard to earn. She's good at what she does. People around her know that. She delivers. She meets deadlines. She rarely says no. But there's something Camilla does that nobody sees. Every time she sends an email, she rereads it at least 3 times before hitting send. Not to fix mistakes, to measure the tone, to check if any sentence might sound rude, to make sure the thank you at the end feels warm enough. Every time she shares an opinion in a meeting, there's a small window of time afterward, 4 seconds. To her, it feels like 40. In those seconds, she scans the room, watching faces, looking for a frown, a raised eyebrow, a glance away, anything that might say, you messed up. Every time a coworker walks past her in the hallway and doesn't smile, she carries the same quiet question for the rest of the afternoon. A question she never says out loud. Did I do something? That's what happens in Camilla's mind. But let me tell you what happens in her body. Camilla wakes up at 6:47. The alarm goes off. She turns it off and lies there for a moment staring at the ceiling. There's a weight there, not tiredness. She actually slept okay, a different kind of weight. Like the day is already sitting on top of her before it even begins. Like there's an invisible list of moments ahead where she'll have to get things right, where she can't disappoint anyone, where she can't let anything slip. She doesn't think this in words. Her body just already knows. She gets up, walks into the bathroom. While she's brushing her teeth, she remembers there's a meeting at 10, and immediately, before a single clear thought forms, her shoulders rise. Her jaw tightens slightly. Her breathing gets shorter. She doesn't notice any of this. All she thinks is, I should prepare for the meeting, but her body was already preparing, with tension, with alertness, with her whole system quietly shifting into a state that says, possible threat, stay sharp. Camilla drinks her coffee. It's too hot, but she drinks it anyway. She's in a hurry, not because she's late, because there's a strange discomfort in staying still, like pausing might be dangerous. Like if things get quiet, the questions might show up. Yesterday afternoon, in a hallway conversation, Daniel made a joke about her project. A light joke. Probably nothing serious. Everyone laughed. Camilla laughed too. That kind of laugh you give when you're not sure if you should laugh, so you laugh anyway just to be safe. But while she's drinking her coffee, the scene comes back. Daniel said, "Well, at least someone's betting on that approach." And there was a pause, before at least. Small. But it was there. What did that pause mean? Camilla doesn't know, and that's exactly why her body has been tense since 6:47. Where does this show up in your body? You don't have to answer, just notice. The 10 a.m. meeting arrives. Camilla walks in with her material ready. She always prepares well, but there's one thing she didn't write down anywhere in her slides. For every point she's presenting, she prepared 2 arguments. One main argument and one backup, in case someone questions her. She doesn't call it defense, she calls it being prepared. But the energy behind those backup arguments is different. It's the energy of someone expecting to be challenged. The meeting begins. Camilla's voice is steady. She practiced that. She learned how to keep her voice steady even when her chest feels tight. Someone asks a question, technical, neutral, completely reasonable. But inside Camilla's body, before she answers, her stomach tightens, her jaw locks. Her fingers press lightly against the table, like they need something to hold on to. All of this happens in less than a second, all before a single word leaves her mouth. The meeting ends. It actually goes well. But when Camilla leaves the room, there's a kind of exhaustion that doesn't match what just happened. A deeper exhaustion, like she ran a distance no one else saw, because she did. The running was just internal. What Camilla carries didn't start in adulthood. And it didn't start in her mind, it started in the body. At some point in her life, her body learned that disapproval from certain people was dangerous. Not dangerous like a knife, dangerous like silence, like rejection, like that feeling that something essential could be taken away from you if you said the wrong thing, looked like the wrong person, or took up too much space. Her body learned that, and like any good learning system, it generalized. The alarm goes off, not because there's real danger, but because something in the present looks similar enough that the body says, last time something like this happened, it was important to be ready. This isn't weakness. At some point, this level of awareness was intelligence. It was a strategy. You're not broken. You learned. Camilla eats lunch alone on Tuesday, not because no one invited her. They did. At 12:15, Anna stopped by her desk and tapped the table lightly. "Come on, we're heading to the sushi place." Camilla smiled and said she just had something to finish. She'd come later. She didn't actually have anything to finish. In that moment, she simply didn't know if she wanted to go, and not knowing felt risky. So she chose the safest exit she could find, one that wouldn't disappoint anyone and wouldn't reveal anything either. She heats up her lunch in the empty break room, sits by the window. Outside there are trees. She almost never looks at them. But today she does. The leaves are still. The sun comes in from the side. There's something about this silence that feels different from silence with people. This silence doesn't ask anything from her. Her right shoulder drops. She doesn't notice it, but it drops. An inch, maybe 2. For a moment, her body found a space where there's nothing to monitor, no one to measure, no faces to read, and automatically, without instructions, it lets go a little. Like a hand that had been holding something heavy and finally found a surface to set it down. She gets almost 15 minutes like this, quiet, alone, before the office slowly fills up again and the system switches back on. She has no idea those 15 minutes were the most regulating thing she did all day. That afternoon, something small happens. Small enough that no one else would remember it, but it will stay in Camilla's mind until she goes to sleep. She sends a message in the team chat. A simple update, 3 lines, clear, objective. She adds a small emoji at the end so it doesn't sound cold. Everyone replies, except Rodrigo. Rodrigo doesn't reply. There are at least 17 reasonable explanations for Rodrigo's silence. Camilla knows all of them. And still, when she walks past his desk and he looks up for just a second, just one, and then looks back at his screen without smiling, her stomach tightens. Not dramatically, not enough that she would mention it if someone asked, but enough to change the flavor of the entire afternoon. At 4 p.m., Rodrigo replies, "Great, thanks for the update." 5 words. Camilla reads them again. She searches the tone. Is it dry? Normal? Too polite? She can't quite tell. And because she can't tell, the tightness doesn't fully leave. It softens, but it stays. That's the cycle. Not a cycle of thoughts, a cycle of bodily states. The body enters alert. Alert creates attention for possible threats. Attention finds ambiguity, because ambiguity is everywhere when you're looking for it. And the ambiguity feeds the alert again. Camilla isn't trapped in a loop of thinking. She's trapped in a loop of sensation, and no one ever taught her how to step out of a sensation loop. Mostly because no one ever pointed out that's where she was. She leaves work at 6:20. On the subway, holding the metal pole, there's finally space for her thoughts to move. They drift back to Daniel from yesterday, to Rodrigo that afternoon, to that moment when the finance director seemed distracted while Camilla was speaking. The train sways, no one is looking at her. But Camilla's body is in exactly the same state it was when she walked into the office that morning. Shoulders, jaw, breathing stuck halfway in her chest. The system never shut off, it just changed the object it was monitoring. Earlier, it was the people in the office. Now, it's the memories of them. This is what her exhaustion really is. It's not the job. She actually likes the job. It's the work of monitoring, invisible, constant, no weekends. A job that never appears in any description of her role. A job she's never given herself permission to call work. After all, everyone deals with people, right? But there's a difference between reading the room and not being able to stop reading it. At home, she eats dinner while watching a show, or at least she tries. The show is playing. But part of Camilla isn't there. She's still in the hallway at work, still rereading Rodrigo's 5 words. Her phone vibrates, a message from her mom. "Everything okay? Haven't heard from you." Camilla types, deletes, types again. The version she finally sends is, "Everything's great, just busy, we'll talk soon." The exclamation mark after great wasn't planned. It just appeared, a small adjustment, a way to make sure nothing sounds wrong. She goes to bed at 11, lies awake for 40 minutes, not thinking about anything specific, just that state where the body can't fully power down and the mind drifts in low orbits, not landing anywhere, not letting anything go. Eventually she falls asleep, and tomorrow will be a new day, one that will begin at 6:47 with that familiar weight in her chest. The system Camilla carries has a technical name, but I'm not going to use it. Technical names create distance, and what I want here is closeness. So let's call it an alarm. Camilla's alarm is old. It's intelligent, and at its core, it's an act of care. A system that learned a long time ago that paying attention to how others felt about her was a way to stay safe. At some point in her life, there was an environment where disapproval had real weight. Maybe it was the expression on a father's face when she made a mistake. Maybe it was the silence of a mother, the kind of silence that meant something more than quiet. Maybe it was a group of kids with the very specific cruelty children can have. Something taught her system this. When someone is unhappy with you, something important is at risk. Her body learned that as fact, not as a possibility, as fact. So the alarm was installed, sensitive, tuned to detect the smallest signal that someone might be displeased. A pause, a look, an email with an uncertain tone. The alarm catches everything, because it was built to miss nothing. The alarm doesn't lie. It reports exactly what it detects. The problem isn't that it lies. The problem is that it was calibrated for an environment that no longer exists. It's using an old map to navigate a new landscape. It's like a smoke detector installed in a kitchen where fires used to happen all the time. Of course it's sensitive. Of course it goes off for heat, for steam. The detector isn't wrong, it's outdated. And the result is that Camilla spends her day responding to alarms that feel like emergencies, but are, most of the time, just steam. The cost is enormous, not just tiredness. It's a life lived in a fraction of herself, because when the system is on alert, there's no room for genuine curiosity, no real presence, no feeling of being somewhere and actually being there, not monitoring, not calculating, just existing. Camilla knows that feeling exists because once in a while, during those 15 quiet minutes at lunch or early on a Sunday morning, she catches a glimpse of it, an opening, a breath that goes a little deeper, and then someone sends a message and everything closes again. The alarm runs on a logic that feels impossible to argue with from the inside. If I pay enough attention, if I adjust enough, I'll avoid disapproval. And if she avoids disapproval, she'll be safe. It works. Partially. Camilla rarely gets into open conflict. She rarely disappoints the expectations she senses in others, but there's a cost the logic never calculates. She never really knows what people think of her, because she spends her time presenting a carefully adjusted version of herself. And any approval she receives comes with a quiet voice underneath it saying they're approving the performance, not you. The maintenance effort never ends, because people are unpredictable. They have bad days. They send short messages because they have a headache, not because they're angry. But the alarm has no way of knowing that. So the body carries the bill, the shoulders, the jaw, the breathing, the sleep, the exhaustion after days that were objectively calm. The body is asking for attention, and this video is one way to start giving it. So let's give it a name, because something happens when you name something that used to be just a vague feeling. Something shifts. It doesn't fix it, not yet, but it changes the relationship. It's like turning on a light in a room you used to know only by touch. The walls are still where they were, but now you can see them. Camilla's shadow has a name. I'm going to get there slowly, because it deserves that. You deserve that. First, I need to show you what the shadow is. The shadow is not weakness. It's not insecurity in the way people usually use that word, like it's a character flaw, a personality defect, something stronger people simply don't have. That explanation is shallow. More than shallow, it's cruel, because it places the weight in the wrong place. The shadow is a part of you that learned how to survive. At some point in your life, in a specific environment, with specific people, your system learned something important, that monitoring other people's approval was necessary. It was intelligent. It was a way to keep something important, connection, safety, love, belonging, that seemed conditional. If I behave the right way, I'm safe. If I don't disappoint, I won't lose it. If I stay alert, I can predict what's coming. That's where the shadow was born. And it did the best it could with what it had. Camilla's shadow has a name. The Watcher. Not the anxious one. Not the insecure one. Not the needy one. The Watcher. Because that's what it does. With skill. With dedication. With an energy that never fully rests. It watches, it scans, it processes social signals at a speed no external system could match. It reads micro-expressions, measures silence, calculates the distance between what was said and what could have been said. The Watcher is extraordinarily competent at its job. That's not the problem. The problem is that it never learned how to turn off, because the Watcher was created in an environment where turning off was dangerous. So it never learned there was a switch. It never learned that there are moments when the dark is safe, moments when Rodrigo's silence is just silence, when the finance director's distracted look is just distraction. The watcher doesn't have access to that information. It only has access to the past. And in the past, turning off had a cost. There's one thing the watcher fears more than anything else. It's not direct criticism. Camilla can actually handle direct criticism. She knows what to do with it. She can respond to it. She can integrate it or push back against it. Direct criticism has shape. It has an address. What the watcher fears is ambiguity, not knowing. That space between someone's behavior and the meaning of that behavior. That space where 1,000 interpretations can exist at once, and none of them come with confirmation. The watcher lives in that space like it's a house on fire. It cannot stay there without acting, without trying to resolve it, without filling the empty space with a theory, even if that theory is the most painful one available. Because a painful explanation is better than no explanation. At least a painful explanation tells you what to do. Adjust. Correct. Move closer carefully and see if the damage can be repaired. But not knowing doesn't tell you anything. And for the watcher, not knowing is unbearable. So it manufactures certainty where there isn't any. And most of the time, it manufactures the most threatening certainty available. Not because Camilla is pessimistic, but because the watcher was trained in an environment where danger was real. So it learned something simple. It's safer to be wrong on the side of danger than wrong on the side of calm. Better to assume Rodrigo is upset and be wrong than assume everything is fine and be caught off guard. That's the watcher's logic, and once the shadow has a name, it loses some of its power. But there's another character in this story, because a shadow never exists alone. It exists in contrast with something. With a part of you, it pushed down, silenced, learned not to trust. I'm going to call that part the one who is here. The one who is here is the opposite archetype of the watcher, not the opposite in the sense of not caring. That would be carelessness, and that's not what we're looking for. The difference is simpler than that. The one who is here can be somewhere without needing to control what that place thinks of her. She walks into a room and feels the room, the temperature, the light, the energy of the people there, without immediately converting that information into data about approval or disapproval. She sends an email and presses send, not on the first draft. She revises, she communicates carefully, she's responsible. But she presses send without rewinding, without measuring every word for potential negative interpretations. She's in a conversation and hears what the person is saying, not what the person might secretly think about her while saying it. The one who is here exists inside Camilla. You can see her in those 15 quiet minutes at lunch. You can see her on a quiet Sunday morning. You can see her in those rare moments when something captures Camilla's attention so completely that the watcher can't compete. A film that pulls her in. A genuine laugh with someone she trusts. A project so interesting she forgets to monitor. She's there. She's just been quieted. Not permanently, not irreversibly. But she learned that showing up too often didn't feel safe. The work of the next 30 days isn't to kill the watcher. It isn't to ignore it, or fight it, or pretend the alarm doesn't exist. The work is slower than that. With patience, we begin giving space to the one who is here. But before we talk about that space, I need to show you the trap. Because there's something Camilla tries, something you've probably tried too, that feels like the solution but actually feeds the exact thing you're trying to solve. The trap is this: trying to control thoughts about what other people think with more thinking. It sounds obvious when you hear it like that, but watch how it appears in real life. Camilla notices she's thinking too much about what Rodrigo thought of her message, so she tells herself, "Stop. This doesn't make sense." She tries to convince herself Rodrigo was probably just busy. She lists the evidence that everything is fine. She builds arguments inside her head against the threat the watcher is detecting. And for a moment it seems like it worked. Then Rodrigo walks down the hallway without smiling, and everything comes back because Camilla didn't regulate the system. She argued with the system. and the system cannot be convinced by arguments. The system isn't a mistaken belief you can correct with better logic. The system is bodily, and bodies don't change through argument. Bodies change through experience. Trying to think your way out of the vigilance loop is like trying to put out a fire with more fire. The mental effort, the suppression, the internal struggle not to think about something. To the nervous system, that effort looks exactly like the energy of danger. So the alarm stays on. Sometimes it gets louder. This explains something Camilla never understood about herself. Why the more she tries not to care what people think, the more she cares, because she's fighting. And to the nervous system, fighting is evidence of threat. If there were no danger, why would you be fighting? So the alarm responds to the suppression the same way it would respond to any threat, by turning up the volume. The way out isn't more fighting. The way out is a different skill, one the watcher never learned. The ability to notice without reacting, to feel the alarm without obeying the alarm, to recognize the sensation in the body without immediately turning it into investigation, adjustment, corrective action. This isn't passivity. It's a different kind of strength, quieter, deeper, harder to learn, and infinitely more effective. Before we move into the practice, I want to leave you with a question. Think about a recent moment, maybe today, maybe sometime this week. A moment when you left an interaction with the feeling that you had done something wrong, or that someone was unhappy with you, but you didn't actually know. There was no confirmation, just a feeling, a tightness, a suspicion without solid evidence. What did you do with that? Did you try to fix it, monitor it, adjust something, a message, a tone, a behavior, to reduce the threat your alarm was signaling? Or was there a small part of you that could notice the tightness, breathe with it for a moment, and let the ambiguity remain ambiguity? You don't have to have done the second one. Most people were never taught how, but that's what we're going to practice. 30 days, not 30 days of dramatic transformation. Not 30 days where you wake up different. Not 30 days where the watcher disappears and the alarm stops. That's not how this works. And anything promising that is selling you a fantasy. 30 days of 3 small movements. Movements the body can learn. Movements the nervous system can absorb. Movements that, repeated consistently, begin to create new pathways. Not erasing the old ones, but building alternative routes that slowly become easier to access. The first movement is lowering the volume of the alarm. Not turning it off, not suppressing it, not arguing with it, lowering it. There is a physical difference between those things, and the body knows the difference even if the mind doesn't have words for it. Turning it off is violent, it's holding the breath, clenching, forcing. Lowering it is regulation, it's letting the shoulders drop, letting the breath deepen. Giving the nervous system a concrete signal that the level of threat can soften. So when the alarm goes off, when the stomach tightens after a message, when the shoulders lift before a meeting, when the jaw locks after an ambiguous interaction, the first move isn't mental, it's physical, a long exhale, longer than the inhale. Because a longer exhale activates the part of the nervous system that signals safety. Not metaphorically, literally. That's how the system works. You can't convince the system you're safe with words, but you can signal safety with the length of your breath. That's the small step. And the small step is what changes everything. Not the grand gesture, not the New Year's resolution, not the decision to never care what people think again. The step you can take right now, in this body, in this moment, a longer exhale. The second movement is mapping the sensation in the body. Once a day, just once. Ask your body, where is this? Not what you're thinking, where you're feeling it. Is it in the stomach, the throat, the shoulders, the chest, the jaw? And then, without trying to change it, without trying to fix anything, stay with that sensation for 30 seconds. Just notice it. Just recognize that it exists, that it has a location, that it's information, not a verdict, not a prophecy, not proof that something is wrong with you. Camilla could do this on the subway ride home. Before replaying the day, she could place a hand lightly on her stomach, quietly, just resting there, and ask, "What's here?" and then stay with whatever shows up, without escaping, without turning it into action, just witnessing. This teaches the system something the watcher never learned, that feeling the sensation does not mean the threat is real, that the alarm can sound and the world doesn't end, that there can be a space between sensation and response. And with practice, that space becomes the place where choice lives. The third movement is acting like the one who is here, in microdoses, not a personality transformation, not an identity overhaul. Microdoses. Once a day, Camilla chooses a small situation, not the most threatening one, not the meeting with the CEO, not the difficult conversation she's been avoiding, something small, where the cost of being present is low. Maybe it's replying to a message without rereading it 3 times. Maybe it's walking into a room without scanning everyone's face. Maybe it's leaving the word sure as sure instead of changing it to absolutely, then back to sure, then thinking about it for 2 minutes. One action, small, concrete, something that tells the system I was present here and nothing collapsed. That kind of information, experiential, physical, real, is the only kind of information the system accepts as a map update. Not argument, not conviction, not willpower. Experience. I did it. I stayed. I survived. The world kept going, and slowly, with hesitation, with setbacks, with days where the watcher takes over again with full force, the map begins to update. Camilla wakes up on a Thursday, 3 weeks after she started. The alarm goes off at 6:47. She turns it off, lies there for a moment, staring at the ceiling. The weight is still there. I need to be honest with you about that. The weight is still there. It doesn't disappear in 3 weeks. It doesn't disappear in 30 days. A system that was built over years doesn't quietly dismantle itself in a month. Anyone who tells you otherwise isn't respecting you. But something is different this morning. Small, almost invisible. But it's there. When she notices the weight, she doesn't immediately push it away. She stays with it for a moment, 5 seconds, maybe 10, and she does something she wouldn't have done 3 weeks ago. She exhales, long, slow. The way you do when you're setting something heavy down on a table, instead of continuing to carry it. The weight doesn't disappear, but her shoulders drop an inch, and she notices. She notices that she noticed. And that moment of awareness where the automatic pattern meets a small pause, where there's a thread of distance between the sensation and the reaction, that moment is the work. That moment is everything. She arrives at work. There's a message from Daniel waiting. Her heart speeds up, her stomach tightens. The watcher lights up immediately, fast, efficient, tireless as always. But this time, before opening the message, Camilla does something. She rests the palm of her left hand lightly on her stomach, quietly. No one sees. And she asks, not in words, just in attention, what's here? What's there is tension, a very specific contraction, a little above her navel, a place she now recognizes as the watcher's favorite address. That's where it lives. That's where it sets up headquarters whenever it detects a possible threat. Camilla breathes. Then she opens the message. Daniel is asking to schedule a conversation about the project. Neutral tone. No extra information. The watcher immediately gets to work. What does that mean? Is something wrong? Is he going to question my approach? And Camilla does something new. She doesn't suppress it. She doesn't argue with it. She doesn't try to convince the watcher that everything is fine. She just notices. Ah, you're here. I know you're here. Then she replies to Daniel, sure, we can set that up. She doesn't reread it. She doesn't replace sure with something else. She doesn't spend 2 minutes adjusting the tone. She hits send and waits for the collapse the watcher always promises will happen. The collapse doesn't come. Life continues, the office continues, the light continues falling through the window the same way it did 5 minutes ago. That's the new data the system needed. Now I want to give you something concrete to take from this. Not a list, not a 7-step protocol, just 3 lines. Literal lines you could write down today if you want. or simply keep as an anchor. The first line is for the moment the alarm goes off. When the tightness appears in the stomach, the throat, the shoulders, write this: my body is in alert mode. This is information, not truth. It's not a positive affirmation. It's not something you have to believe. It's just a reminder that there's distance between the signal and reality. A smoke detector can be ringing and the kitchen might not be on fire. The second line is for the end of the day. Not a full analysis of your day, just one small question. Answer it in one sentence. Today, when was I truly present? It might be 30 seconds. It might be those 15 quiet minutes at lunch. It might be a real laugh. What you're training here is the ability to recognize the one who is here when she appears. Because what you recognize, you can find again. The third line is for the moments when the watcher wins. And it will win. Often, especially at the beginning. In those moments, write this: the watcher showed up. It was trying to protect me. Tomorrow is another day. No punishment, no analysis, no spiral of self-criticism about the spiral, just recognition and closure. Because one of the most painful patterns the watcher creates is retrospective criticism, judging yourself for being vigilant. You can't leave the loop by criticizing the loop. You leave the loop with enough gentleness to try again tomorrow. There's something important to say carefully about the one who is here. She isn't careless. She isn't indifferent. She isn't someone who doesn't care about anything. That would be detachment, another form of protection. The one who is here cares. She cares about people. She cares about the quality of her interactions. She has genuine social sensitivity, and that sensitivity is a gift, not a flaw. What she doesn't do is torture herself with ambiguity. When Rodrigo doesn't reply, she feels the tightness, but she lets the tightness remain what it is: incomplete information about an incomplete situation. She doesn't turn it into an investigation. She doesn't build stories. She doesn't adjust herself in response to ghosts. She can say, I don't know what Rodrigo is thinking, and be okay not knowing. It sounds simple when written like that. In the body, it's one of the hardest exercises there is for someone who has carried the watcher for years, because the watcher was built specifically to not tolerate uncertainty. And asking it to tolerate uncertainty feels like asking it to abandon the only control mechanism it has. So you don't ask it to abandon it. You offer it an alternative, slowly, with repetition, with patience for the setbacks, with the understanding that the watcher isn't the enemy. It's a part of you that learned how to survive, a part that did the best it could with what it had, a part that deserves to be released from a job it's held for far too long. The shadow has a name, and once it has a name, it loses power. Let's talk about the 30th day. Not because everything will be solved on day 30, but because something happens when you reach the end of a month of small, consistent practice. Not perfect practice, not linear practice, full of days where the watcher took over again, and you realize you arrived, you tried. There were moments, maybe small ones, maybe brief ones, when you were the one who is here. Moments when you were in a room, and you were actually in it. Moments when you received an ambiguous message, and you breathed before catastrophizing. Moments when you said something honest, and didn't spend the next 40 minutes measuring how it landed. Those moments accumulate, not dramatically, no fireworks, but the system learns from them. Each experience of, I did it, I stayed, I survived. The world kept going, adds new information to the old map. Slowly, the body updates. And one day, not necessarily on day 30, maybe day 40, maybe day 70, maybe some random Tuesday that seemed completely ordinary, you'll notice something. Your shoulders are down, not because you forced them down, because the system realized in that moment there was no need to raise them, and you'll notice it, you'll recognize it, and you'll know where it came from. This channel exists for that, to sit with what's difficult without pretending it's easy, to look at the parts of you that learn to survive in ways that now cost more than they protect. to give a name to what has lived without one, because the shadow has a name, and once it has a name, it loses power. You are not broken. You learned. And what was learned can, with time, with gentleness, and with the willingness to stay with discomfort instead of running from it, be unlearned, not erased, not denied, integrated. The watcher won't disappear. But slowly, it can learn to trust that you can handle what it was trying to prevent, that you can survive ambiguity, that you remain whole even when someone doesn't approve, that Rodrigo's silence is just silence. And in that moment, that very specific moment when the system updates its map and your shoulders drop without you asking, you'll understand in your body what I tried to say here with words, not in your head, in your body, which is where all of this began, and where it can finally begin to change. If something in this video touched you in a way you're still processing, a feeling, an image, a moment in Camilla's story that felt a little like your own, you don't have to do anything with it right now. Just let it stay. The body knows how to keep what matters. See you next time.